Welcome back to the channel. My name is David. This is Fresh Faces, New Ideas. If you like what I do and you want to keep supporting me, please like and subscribe to the channel. You can follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas. You can also now listen to me on the most recent episode of the Productive Conversations podcast, and you can listen to me on the Center Left Radio podcast on Fridays. So this video is going to cover two separate votes. One of them was to give the Capitol Police the Congressional Medal of Honor, and the other one was to the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. So the reauthorization is the one we're going to go over first because it's more lengthy and it requires more in-depth analysis, and then we'll go over the reasons why the 12 Republicans voted against giving congressional medals and their arguments. So first, the Violence Against Women Act. So this was passed in 1994. This was part of the overall crime bill. This was one of the few really good pieces of legislation that Joe Biden had while he was a senator. And then it was reauthorized in 2013 most recently, and then it lapsed under Republican control and Donald Trump, and then it was reauthorized again in 2019. So the Democratic House passed it in 2019, and then it died in the Senate again. So what the reauthorization does is it just updates the bill because, it covers originally when it was reupdated in 2013, it was to cover same-sex couples, and they fell under that same type of protection as regular, as a man and women couple. So that was the reauthorization now. So this current reauthorization expands it even further. So we're going to go look at that, what the current reauthorization is, what the argument against it is, and then we're going to talk about the votes against it. Okay. All right. So this is the four main things that would change. So it closes the boyfriend loophole for firearm purchases. The bill would bar anyone convicted of stalking or domestic abuse from being able to purchase a firearm. At the moment, this restriction only applies to partners who are married, cohabitating, or have children with the victim. So currently what it is you have to be able, you can't purchase a firearm if you have been convicted of a felony. So this would lower it to a misdemeanor. And now the key thing in this, and this is ultimately what is the largest pushback on this bill, is they're arguing that it's some type of gun control. That's why you can't have it, because you're needlessly pushing gun control on the American people. One of the biggest indicators of further violence or death to a partner is if you end up having domestic violence cases, and if you have stalking abuse. If you're found guilty of these, it's generally a high indicator that further violence is to come. That's generally what the data shows. So what the boyfriend loophole does is it allows people who have been found guilty on these charges at a misdemeanor level to still purchase firearms, and that further puts abusers or abused victims in further danger. That's what this loophole is going to close. Now, keep in mind, this is not to say I can accuse any random person of stalking and now they're just never going to be able to get a firearm. They have to actually be convicted of it. That is the key thing. So anyone who says, oh, well, if you just make a false accusation and I'm convicted of it, then, if you just make a false accusation, then I can't buy a gun. So this is really where the biggest pushback on the bill is this boyfriend loophole for firearm purchases. Now, keep in mind, the bill expands for much more things, but the NRA is very much against this, and they pushed against it in 2019, and they pushed against it now. So this is generally the reasoning that they push for not voting for this bill. The next thing is increases accountability for incidents on tribal lands. Currently, Native American tribes don't have jurisdiction to prosecute certain violent acts against women by non-tribal members, including sexual assault, limiting the legal accountability of some offenders. This bill will change it. So part of the problems that we have in America is that tribal lands are kind of like their own little country in a little bit, is they have their own jurisdictions over things, but there are certain things that they can't prosecute. So what this does is it allows them to expand that jurisdiction and allows them to actually prosecute people who commit these type of acts against women. So this helps protect them as well. Additional funding for cultural specific services. The legislation includes $40 million for the Department of Health and Human Services to specifically tailor programs to the needs of communities of color, including improving language access. So this is for people who say, You got to learn the language if you're going to be here. This would help with that. This will help target where some of the areas of the worst parts of it is, based on what this says here is. It'll help target to help improve certain areas, which is always good. More funding for rape and prevention and education programs. There's a boost in funding to efforts aimed at preventing sexual assault, including grants that will go to states and community-based incentives. The reauthorization will designate $100 million per fiscal year to these programs. So one of the biggest problems we have with sexual assault and rape is that there's just a backlog of the rape kits. So this would help push for that and would allow us to have people actually arrested for rape. So that helps expand the program. So those are the big changes. It does an increase in what qualifies you to be able to purchase a gun. Now, keep in mind, once again, this is the most important part. The restriction is you have to be convicted of it. So just because somebody brings a case against you doesn't mean that you lose your access to a firearm. What you do lose access to a firearm is if you are convicted of these counts. Now, the people who defend firearms say, you should be able to buy it legally, or, you don't want felons to get it. These people would be felons. Well, originally it's felons, but now they put it down to misdemeanors because it's too easy for them to still get it, and then they further this violence by being able to have access to these firearms. Now, keep in mind, all of this comes after the Atlanta shooting. So, for when this happens, if you've watched this video in the future, currently in Atlanta, there was a man who went to multiple different massage parlors and he killed 8 people, 7 of which were women, 6 of which were Asian American women. Now, there's a whole lot of other information going on with this, and I'm going to go into that more in the live stream tomorrow. But as it stands, that is the background to them currently having passed this bill. So keep that in mind. So now we're going to go to this 2019 article? 2019. So this was the previous time it was voted for. So this is the key point. The vote was 263 to 158. 33 Republicans joined this bill. When it passed yesterday, 29 Republicans agreed with this bill. So somewhere between 2019 and 2021, 4 more Republicans either decided that having access to a gun for a abuser is okay, or they decided that abuse for women is not as big a deal. Now, the Republican argument, and there's 2 things that are going to happen here. One is that it's going to go to the upper chamber, and they're going to need to get 10 Republicans to vote for it, unless we do something about the filibuster. And I keep repeating this. It is very important that is repeated over and over again, that every single piece of legislation the House passes is irrelevant if it cannot get through the filibuster. And whether there's no change to the filibuster, this then goes on top of the pile of things that are protected, that are stopped by the filibuster. So that pile currently includes expansive voting rights in the Voting Rights Act, expansive in closing more gun loopholes in H.R. 8 and H.R. 1446, which I covered. It expands the Equality Act, which I covered, H.R. 5, which allows gay and trans people to have more protection under the Equality Act. It goes against the George Floyd policing bill. So every single one of these pieces of legislation just go and die in the Senate, all for preserving some type of idea about the Senate that doesn't actually exist, as I covered in my filibuster video and I covered in the Mitch McConnell speech video. So there's a whole bunch of things that need to be changed for the filibuster. The other thing with this is 172 Republicans voted against this act, and their argument is going to be that we're going to push a bill that will try to fix this. Now, I don't know what's going to be in this bill. It probably will not have the closing the boyfriend loophole. That's almost absurd that it will not have that. So whether their bill will be able to pass or it's going to be so watered down that it's not even going to be worth it, we will have to see. So when they ultimately come out with something, we will take a look at it. If only the boyfriend loophole thing is against it, I don't know if you just pass a bill without it, because this seems like a pretty big thing, that, stopping people who have this history from being able to purchase firearms seems like it would be a pretty large, big issue that you should be able to look at. Then, so it's 172 Republicans have voted against this. And then we're going to go to this other one. So the other vote was for giving the Congressional Medal to the Capitol Police officers for their duty on the January 6th riot, for how they fought. A dozen Republicans voted against this bill, and they'll be listening to this. So let's go through the key facts and their reasoning. So this bill, which passed 413 to 12, referred to January 6 rioters, mob of insurrectionists, and applauded the patriotism and commitment of officers Brian Sicknick, who they just arrested 2 people in his murder right after the Ron Johnson comments. So that was this week. Howard Liebengood, who was one of the officers who died by suicide, and Eugene Goodman. Now, Eugene Goodman was the officer who led the mob in the opposite direction, which was like seconds away from finding the senators and the Congress people. So that's who, remember when you see that one black officer who said something to the mob and then ran the opposite direction, that's who Eugene Goodman is. So Louis Gohmert of Texas plans to introduce a competing resolution that would also award a gold medal to the Capitol Police, but he claimed in a statement the existing bill seeks to drive a narrative that isn't substantiated by facts, although he didn't specify which part of the bills he dislikes or believe are unsubstantiated. So what he's probably referring to, and this is something that keeps coming up, is this idea that the people who stormed the Capitol were not Trump supporters or Republicans. They were either, they were Antifa, they were false flag people. This is something that keeps coming up over and over again. Ron Johnson has pushed this. Matt Gaetz has pushed this. Different Marjorie Taylor Greene has pushed this. Different outlets have pushed this about whether they believe that the people who stormed the Capitol wearing Trump flags and chanting "Stand with Trump" and "Hang Mike Pence" and "Fight for Trump" were actually Trump supporters. So that's part of the thing that he could be fighting. Similarly, Matt Gaetz told reporters the bill included editorial comments. Andy Harrison said in a statement that the bill contains partisan language. Representative Thomas Marcy and Marjorie Taylor Greene don't like the word insurrectionist and the description of the Capitol of a temple of American democracy. Now, we'll go into the temple thing in a second. But look, this is what I said. It was very clear they were trying to overthrow the election. So insurrectionist is the appropriate charge for them. But of those, 7 Republicans have not responded. So this is so here's Louis Gohmert's alternative bill. It omits all references to the riots in January 6th, instead offering more general praise to the Capitol Police dedication and sacrifice. This is according to a draft. The bill mourns the death of Sicknick and Liebengood, but only says they passed in January. So this is basically the point. They want to downplay this, and they've been trying to do this since it happened because they know this looks bad, because there's no way to get around the fact that this was their supporters pushed on by their president to do this attack. All right, that's every single one of them who gets arrested says, this is why I was doing it. And so this is a watered down bill that they don't want to have any ties to. They just want to pretend it didn't happen. And that's the goal here. Now, for the temple tangent, in the description of the bill, it says that the Capitol is a temple of American democracy. Now, you're thinking, well, okay, but isn't that like a weird phrase? It is a weird phrase because we are supposed to have separation of church and state, and part of it is just flowery language. However, if we go to the actual definition of temple, it's we can look into the second and third definitions of it. So the second one is a local lodge of any various fraternity orders, the buildings housing it. So this could be a discussion of the Capitol, because it is fraternity order. You're generally considered to be like part of a more elite club if you're a congressperson or a senator. But it's also the third definition is really what it is. So it's a place devoted to a special purpose, and it says a temple of cuisine, which could refer to as a restaurant or something. So look, temple is a weird way to describe it. It's a weird reason to vote against this just like simple act. Like, this is very similar to when Rand Paul didn't stand when they were just giving them a round of applause in the Senate for their hard work, but it's very ridiculous. So let's wrap this up. So what do we know from this? So the Violence Against Women Act was opposed by 172 Republicans. It was supported by more Republicans 2 years ago. And the biggest hurdle appears to be the boyfriend loophole, which says that if you are convicted of a misdemeanor for stalking or domestic violence, you are no longer able to purchase a firearm. Now, the Republicans have 2 options. They're going to this bill is going to go to the Senate, and we will see whether it dies in the Senate or whether there is some type of push there. However, we will also see what the Republican competing bills, because they said they're going to push one out. The question with the Republican competing bill is it going to be so watered down that it's not going to be worth it? Now, on to the medal of the Medal of Praise, the Congressional Gold Medal. Look, man, this is just like symbolic. They did a good job. And the fact that 12 Republicans are arguing it, and their arguments, look, if it was just like one or two who said, look, I don't like the words, I'm voting for this, but I don't like the word temple in it, that would be one thing. But it's 12 of them, and most of their arguments appear to be, I don't like the wording of the word riot and insurrection, which are both things that happen. So the only reason that you're arguing this partisanship is because you know it's your side and it's bad. And look, let's be very clear. Had this been Black Lives Matter that had stormed the Capitol, and Democrats were saying the same thing in this type of thing, even though they don't, there's a break between them and Black Lives Matter, my commentary would be exactly the same. This is the description of the events that happened. We saw it. That's what happened. All right. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.